So we started with supply chain management, and in supply chain management, we discussed different functions and activities, and we discussed about forecasting. We discussed about different methods, for example, moving averages, weighted moving averages, exponential smoothing, and then we also discussed about techniques that are used to assess robustness of this forecasting technique, like mean absolute deviation, mean squared error, and mean absolute percentage error. And then we also finished this chapter, that's inventory management, where we discussed that what are the advantages and disadvantages of holding inventory. We discussed that there are both. There are advantages and disadvantages, and therefore we need to hold an optimum level of inventory, and we measure that optimal level by using a model that was economic order quantity. And then we also discussed about information management, that how information is so important, especially information between a company and its suppliers, and with retailers, distributors. We discussed example of Walmart and Aldi and their practices, that how they print their barcodes on all sides in order to increase this information management and to make things smarter and more efficient. We also discussed about quality assurance and other thing, and today we'll be discussing briefly about purchasing, which means procurement or sourcing. And it's one of the critical function in the sense, if you ask any automobile manufacturing company that, okay, what is the distribution of your revenues? I mean, your revenues are in billions. So what happens? Where do they go? And they would tell that a significant portion of their revenues goes to their suppliers, which means their cost is big. And that also makes sense because they have a lot of components which they buy from their suppliers, and therefore their cost is big. And therefore many organizations, they have a dedicated department, purchasing department or procurement department, and the objective of that department is to reduce the cost of purchasing, and also making sure that you don't make a compromise on quality of product, making sure that products are received on time. You don't make any type of compromises on specifications. Now I want to give example that how important is materials cost, and I will switch to Microsoft Excel file. So this is the Microsoft Excel file. It's available on Blackboard, and over here we'll be discussing some examples. So for example, the first thing is that here is some data, and data is that the revenues of a company is $1 million. Its material cost is $440,000. Labor cost is $200,000. Overhead is $200,000. And total cost is the sum of these three, which means 440,000 plus 200,000 plus 200,000. And these three total, they become 840,000. And then we calculate profit. Profit, which means revenues minus total cost. So 1 million minus 840,000 is equal to 160,000. So this is the profit of the company. So if you don't have these formulas in your Excel sheet, we can do it. For total cost calculation, that will be sum of these three things: material plus labor plus overhead. So you may also wish to add this formula if it is not already there. And that will give us total cost being 840,000. And then profit will be 1 million minus total cost. That's 840,000, and that would be 160,000. So this is our starting data. Now, the question is that what would happen if you reduce material cost by 15%? So let's see, for example, if we have this data, and in this data, our material cost is 440,000. So we want to reduce this material cost by 440,000. And the reason we want to do that, because this material cost is one essential component of purchasing or procurement. So there is always pressure on materials manager to reduce this cost. So we want to know that if you are successful in reducing this material cost, to some extent, it may cause big gains in revenues and in profit. So over here in this one, we'll be doing this calculation. Everything will remain the same. The only thing that will change is this material cost. We are going to reduce this material cost by 15%. As you can see here, material cost is minus 15%. So revenues remains the same, 1 million. Okay. Now for material cost is 440,000, and we are going to reduce it by 15%. So which means the new material cost will become 440,000 multiplied by 85%. 100 minus 15 is equal to 85. So 440,000 multiplied by 85%, that will be our new material cost after reduction. So that will be 440,000 multiplied by 0.85. And again, what is 0.85? 0.85 represents 85%. And what does that mean? Because we have reduced cost by 15%, so which means 100 minus 15 is equal to 85. So that will be our new material cost. And as you can see, the new material cost turns out to be $374,000. So that's the only thing we are going to change. And let me highlight this one. Other costs would remain the same, which means labor cost, that's 200,000, remains the same. Overhead, which again is 200,000, would also remain the same. And total cost, no, we need to calculate it. So for total cost, again, we know it is the sum of these three costs, which mean material cost plus labor cost plus overhead cost. So material cost plus labor plus overhead, and that gives us $774,000. So this is our new total cost. So initially, our total cost was 840,000, but in the new scenario, when we were able to reduce it by 15%, our total cost becomes 774,000. Okay, the next step is to calculate profit. And we know the formula for profit is equal to revenues, which is $1 million, minus total cost, that is 774,000. So that will be 1 million minus 774,000. So that becomes 226,000. So which means our new profit is 226,000. Our initial profit was 160,000. But the new profit that we obtain after reducing this material cost by 15% becomes 226,000. In the next step, we want to calculate how much change it is. I mean, the change in profit, what is the percentage change? And if you recall, there's a formula. I will write it here. And if you recall, I'll be using the same formula that we used in productivity calculation chapter. You know, in productivity calculation chapter, there was a formula that was about percentage change in productivity. So I'll be using the same formula here. Anybody remembers that formula? What was the formula that we did in productivity calculation? And then to get percentage, we multiply it by 100. So that's a formula that's used to calculate any type of change. Whenever we want to find, for example, if we talk about inflation, you want to see how much percentage change has happened, you will find out what was the inflation last year, what's the inflation this year, and then we will use this formula, that's current inflation minus previous inflation divided by previous, and in order to convert it into percentage, we will multiply by 100. So that will give us percentage change. So this is the formula we use in every situation whenever we are supposed to calculate some delta, which means we are required to calculate percentage change. So I'll be using the same formula here to calculate percentage change in profit, that initially we had 160,000, but now we have 226,000. How much is the change, percentage change? So here I will write here is equal to, and I will write this in parentheses, which means current, that is 226,000 minus previous, that's 160,000, parenthesis close, divided by the previous one, that's 160,000. And if I hit enter, it gives me 41.25%. There is a possibility that you may get some answer, a weird type of answer, that could be 0.4125. If that's the case, just click on this percentage. So if you are not getting 41.25, but you are getting 0.4125, then you need to click on percentage, and this one will be converted into percentage. Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody got the same answer. If you got a different answer, please let me know. Okay, now what's the lesson here? The reason why we did this calculation, you can see here that this calculation and this calculation, they are almost identical, with the only difference that in this one, we just made one change, and that was we negotiated with the supplier and we requested that this material cost be reduced. And this is something that supply managers, purchase manager, procurement manager, they have to do. That's their job. They have to do negotiation, and they use different type of techniques. Sometimes they use coercive technique. They would say, okay, if you are not gonna give us a very competitive rate, we will switch to your competitors. So that's their job. So if they are able to reduce this 15% cost, which is not really big, although it's something a little bit challenging, requires hard negotiations with supplier. So, but if you are able to reduce this material cost, then your profitability will increase by 41%. So a reduction of 15% in material cost will bring about 41.2% increase in your profitability. And that is a very good proposition. Why not? So this is the reason why procurement function is so critically important, that every penny, every dollar you save here in material cost, it will appear here as a big gain in your revenues and in your profits. Okay, do you have any question, or should I move to the next part? All right, so here we have one more example. And in this example, we'll be making a reduction of 20%. So again, we have this data, which is the same data. And as you can see here, this is the total cost. And total cost is 440,000 plus 200,000 plus 200,000, that's 840,000. And then profit is 160,000, and it's exactly the same data that we used here. But the only difference we are gonna make here is that instead of reducing material cost by 15%, we are going to reduce material cost by 20%, which means we will be doing exactly the same process, with the only difference that this material cost, that's 440,000, we will be multiplying it by 80% or 0.8. Why 0.8? Because that is 20% reduction. So 100 minus 20% is equal to 80%. So 80% is the cost that you are paying. So 440,000 multiplied by 0.8, that would be our new material cost. And then we want to find out reduction this 20% material cost, it brings about what change in our profitability. So revenues remains the same. I will manually enter here $1 million. And material cost, that's gonna change, of course, and that will be 440,000 multiplied by 0.8 or just 80%. And let's see what happens. So our new material cost becomes 352,000. So initially our material cost was 440,000, but with 20% reduction, it becomes 352,000. Other costs remain the same. We are not going to touch labor costs, that's 200,000. That remains the same. That's overhead cost, that remains the same. And then for total cost, we know total cost is the sum of materials cost plus labor cost plus overhead cost. So total cost will be the sum of these three, is equal to sum of 352,000 plus 200,000 of labor plus 200,000 of overhead. And our total cost becomes 752,000. Let me highlight this part just to show that we only made this change. We made a change only in material. The rest of the thing remains the same. The next part is calculating profit. So profit calculation, we know that profit is equal to our revenue, which is $1 million, minus total cost, which is 752,000. And profit becomes 248,000. So initially, our profit was 160,000. But with this slight change, for example, in this case, to bring about a reduction of 20%, maybe you changed supplier or you changed your strategy. You said that, okay, we are gonna buy from you in bulk, which means, this is one thing we discussed about. One of the advantage of holding inventory is that when you have large inventory, you are buying something from bulk from your supplier, they have to offer you discount because you are buying in bulk in large quantity. So in any case, whatever strategy you are using, whether you are buying something in bulk or you changed your supplier or any other type of strategy, so this 20% reduction in material cost has brought you a profit of 248,000, which is significantly higher than the earlier one that was 160,000. Now, in the next step, we are going to calculate what is that percentage change, which means when we move from 160,000 to 248,000, how much change it represents. And we'll be using the same formula that we just used earlier, which means percentage change is equal to current minus previous divided by previous, and then you can multiply by 100 to calculate percentage. So can you please do it quickly and tell me what answer do you get for this percentage change in profit?
I got 55%.
Okay, thank you. I think that's correct. So that's current minus previous divided by previous and 55%. And again, if you are not getting 55, you are getting something 0.55, you can just click on this percentage and it will be converted into a percentage. So just wanted to make sure that everybody got 55%. All right. Okay, now in the next part, we are going to do another calculation and we'll be using another a little bit advanced function in Microsoft Excel. Okay, so over here, our objective is that, for example, you have to cut cost. This is the basic function of managers, unless you are working in Washington, D.C. So the main duty of every manager is to cut their cost, right? So, for example, over here, we did this material cost and we were able to make a 15% reduction, and then we saw that it brings an increase of 41.25%. And we also made here a reduction, a cut of 20%, and then we saw that causes an increase of 55%, which is a very good proposition. I would definitely buy that. So now over here, you can see there are many other variables. So for example, you can see here revenue is one variable, material is another variable, labor is another variable, overhead is another variable, and total cost is the sum of these three. And then profit is, we calculate by subtracting these total costs from revenue. So you can see here that we have at least these three variables these four variables which we can change, we can manipulate. Revenue, that's in our control. We can increase revenue, which means forcing people and giving them some incentives that they should do more selling, that will increase revenue. Material, we can do that. We can use some type of strategies to reduce material cost. And labor, again, that's in our hand, labor cost. You can lay off some labor. And then overhead cost, which means the cost of overhead, like some energy bills and lease and insurance and all these type of things, utility bills, etc. That's also in our control. So these are four variables that we can control. And we just experimented with only one, that's material. We reduced it by 15% initially and then by 20%. Now we want to do an experiment that, okay, what would happen if you want to, in this case, if you want to have this profit that is 226,000, but material cost reduction is not possible, which means although you want to get this profit that's 226,000, but your efforts to reduce material cost, they did not work. Reduction in material cost is not possible because maybe suppliers are very powerful, they have monopoly, and I won't be surprised if this thing happens. So then what else can you do? For instance, maybe one option is that you increase the revenues. So how much revenue should be increased to get this profit that's 226,000, which means the increased profit. But instead of reducing material cost, we cannot reduce material cost, but we want to increase our revenues. So of course, I mean, we can always do calculation. We know the formula is that, and this thing for profit is equal to revenues minus total cost. But I want to introduce you to another function that's meant to make these type of calculations. And I have given some snapshots here, which mean if you ever get confused or if you don't understand, so these snapshot, they will help you. So the thing that we are going to use, first of all, let's enter here value. So again, as you can see here, the objective of this part is that instead of reducing material cost, you want to increase the revenues, but you want to increase the same profit that was 226,000 that we obtained over here. And I think this part is important because if you are able to understand the problem, it means 50% of the problem has already been solved. So therefore, I would just take one more minute to explain the problem. So over here, as you can see, it says increase revenues instead of reducing material cost. So initially, we had this material cost 440,000 and we reduced by 15% here and then 20% in the later part. And then we obtained here a profit that was 226,000 here. I mean, 226,000. So, this is a profit that we got. Now, I want to get the same profit here. I'm just writing it temporarily. I will remove it. And when it comes to material cost, I don't want to change material cost. Material cost would remain the same. That's 440,000. Labor cost would also remain the same. Overhead would also remain the same. And accordingly, total cost would also remain the same. So the only variable that I'm going to manipulate over here is revenues. So let me highlight it in gray color to show that this is the variable we are going to manipulate. Just like over here, we manipulated, we changed material cost, same thing here, and over here, it will be revenue. All right, now let's start solving it. So material cost remains the same because we are not going to reduce material cost, but instead we are choosing a different route, that is increasing revenues. Okay, labor cost, that remains the same, 200,000. Overhead remains the same, that's 200,000. And total cost would also remain the same. We have to calculate it, and total cost is the sum of materials cost plus labor cost plus overhead. And that becomes 840,000, which is the same, no change. So you can see here that all these three variables, that remain the same. We did not make any change. The only change we are going to make will be in revenue. How much? We want to know. So basically, the idea is that we want to calculate this profit. And now over here, I will write this calculation, the formula for a profit. So, what's the formula for profit? The formula for profit is equal to revenues minus total cost. Now, once I'm gonna hit enter, it will give me some false number because we know that revenue cell is empty. There is nothing. So it will give me something in negative, but that's not important. The important thing is that I just want to have a formula here. So that gives me 840,000, which is a false number. I mean, that's just temporary. It will change. We are only concerned that there is a formula there. And we can see here, there's a formula which says C12 minus C16, which means this one, revenue minus total cost. It is there. Okay. Now, again, our objective is that we want to achieve a profit of how much? We want to achieve a profit of 226,000. But instead of reducing material cost, we want to increase our revenue. So how much revenue should be increased to achieve a profit of 226,000? And for this purpose, we are going to use a function in Microsoft Excel that is called as goal seek function. So here's the function. For this purpose, you will click on data. And after data, you will see here what if analysis. And in the drop down list of what if analysis, you will find goal seek function. So please click on that. Okay, now here we have this goal seek function, and there are some nuances that I want to explain here. So first of all, it says that what we have to do, set cell means the cell that's containing your formula. So which cell is containing our formula? This formula, that's profit. So I will be choosing this one. So in set cell, you specify the cell that's containing your formula, and the formula is in profit. To value, what value do we want here? I mean, that's my question to you. Please tell me what value of profit I want here. Can anyone tell me?
$226,000.
That's right. So we want here 226,000, which means here it's not visible, but this one, the 226,000. So we want this value of profit, but instead of reducing material cost through a different route, and that route is through revenues. In any case, we want to change this to 226,000 by changing what? By changing revenues, because this is something we have to determine, that what change in revenue should be carried out to achieve this profit of 226,000. So by changing cell, I will click on this revenue or this gray cell. And that's it. Okay, before I hit enter or I click on OK, just notice something. First of all, this gray cell is empty. There's nothing there. And for profit, we have this false value. I told earlier that it's 840,000. And this is 840,000 because this revenue cell is empty. So that's why it's giving us this false number. So when I'm going to click on OK, then it will change this. First of all, some value of revenue will appear here. Currently, it's empty. There's nothing. And also profit, it's in negative. So let's see, when I hit on OK, it has done some calculation. It says that this one, it becomes 1,066,000. This is the value that Microsoft Excel has calculated. So Microsoft Excel goal-seek function is telling us that if you want to achieve this profit, that's 226,000. But instead of reducing material cost, we did not reduce material cost. Material cost remains the same. But instead, you wanted to increase your revenue. So in order to achieve the same profit level, that's 226,000 that we had obtained here, but instead of reducing material costs, you need to increase your revenues by 66,000. So initially, your revenues were $1 million, and revised revenue to achieve this level of profitability would be 1,066,000. So this is a very useful function in Microsoft Excel that's called as goal-seek function. All right, okay. Let's change the next part. The next part is to calculate percentage change in revenue. So because over here, we are making a change in revenue. So we want to see how much change has happened when we make this transition from 1 million to $1,066,000. How much change happens over here? What percentage change this transition represents? So again, I'll be using the same formula that I have here. Percentage change is equal to current minus previous divided by previous multiplied by 100. So I'll be using this formula, and that will be, did anyone already calculate it? If you did, please let me know. So this is the formula that I'll be using, which means our current, which means 1,066,000 minus 1 million divided by 1 million. And if I hit enter, it says that there is a change of 6.6%. So in other words, this is telling us that this is the change that 6.6% happens. So this supply chain management problem is giving us two options. One option is that you want to increase your revenues. One option is that reduce your material cost by 15%. So this is we reduce by 15%. The other option is that if you cannot do so, you are unable to do so, then you can use another route, which means increasing your revenues. And in this case, it would require an increase of 6.6%. And because it's a very big value, it's in million, all other values are in thousands. So 440,000, 200,000, 200, and this is in millions. So making this change, that is 66,000, would mean exactly the same effect that cost reduction of 15% brings. Okay, now I want you to do this problem yourself and tell me what answer do you get. Again, the idea is the same, that this is material cost. We are not going to reduce this material cost. We want to keep it the same. Labor cost would remain the same. Overhead would remain the same. And total cost, which depends on material, labor, and overhead, would also remain the same, which means like this one. And we want to achieve higher level of profitability, which means in this case, we want to, instead of reducing material cost, and to get this profit of 248,000, we want this profit, 248,000 here, but through increase in revenue. So what should you do? Please go ahead and solve this part yourself and tell me what answer do you get.
Hey, Dr. Asif, I have a question.
Mhm.
Would material costs not rise proportionally along with revenues?
So material cost is a different thing, revenue is a different thing. Yes, that's right, which mean if you increase your material cost, that's going to affect your revenue. So the objective of this problem is that we want to explore two routes, which mean one thing is that, okay, is there a possibility that you can reduce material cost? Sometime it is possible, sometime you can do negotiation with suppliers, and then you can do that, but sometimes it's not possible. So in that case, we want to see, okay, we say we are going to keep this constant. We are not going to increase material cost, but we just want to know how much increase in the revenue would be required. So that's the second route that we want to explore in this part.
Okay, cool. Cool.
So here's our material cost, that's 440,000, that remains the same, we didn't make any change. This is labor cost, that's 200,000, that remains the same. Overhead cost, that's 200,000, that remains the same. And total cost, that's the sum of these three. So you can see here, these three variables, they remain the same: material, labor, and overhead, and total cost remains the same. Okay, now you need to find out how much increase in revenue is needed to achieve a profitability of 248,000. So first thing is that make sure there's a formula here, and that formula for profit is equal to revenue minus total cost, and that will give me some false number because we know revenue cell is empty, but we don't care. We are only concerned having a formula here, a syntax. That's 840,000. Okay, now can you please do the next part that's using goal seek function and tell me what revenue would be required to achieve a profit of 248,000? If anyone has already done it, please let me know what's your answer. Anyone successfully calculated? All right. So set cell means the cell that's containing our formula for profit. So which means this one. So it becomes G17 to value. We want to convert this to what value? We want to convert it to 248,000. That's a profitability that we want, but not by material cost reduction, but rather through a different route. So we want to make it 248,000. And the next one is that by changing cell. Which cell we want to change? We want to change this one. Currently, it's empty. There's nothing. It's the revenue cell. There's nothing here. And we want to change this one to see how much revenue would be required to achieve a profit of 248,000. And if I hit OK, and again, before I hit OK, as you can see here, this revenue cell is currently empty. There is nothing there, and profit, it is showing me some false number that's a negative. But as soon as I hit on OK, they will change. So once I click on OK, it is doing this calculation. It says it successfully did this calculation, and it says that in order to achieve a profit of 248,000, instead of reducing material cost, the other route is increasing your revenue, and that would require an increase of $88,000. So no, this means that you have two options here. One option was that reduce this material cost, which we actually did earlier over here. We reduced from 440,000 to 352,000. Or if you cannot do that, the other alternative is to increase your revenues. Give higher target to your sales teams, and that high target would be, I want this revenue of 1,088,000, and that would give you the same level of profit. And the last one is to calculate percentage change in profit, and that would be current minus previous divided by previous, and if hit enter, it gives us 8.8%. So this is the whole idea for this calculation. We are up with time. I'll be discussing this very briefly in next class. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me, or otherwise you're free to leave.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Joseph. You too.